Hi, everybody. Welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. My name is Jared. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe. So I've finally gotten around to Elder Bednar's talk. I missed it because we went to the conference center for the Saturday afternoon session of General Conference, but then we decided to come home, and so we missed the Saturday evening session. And it turns out that he was the last speaker of that session. So I feel like this talk was highlighted. And it's called In the Space of Not Many Years, which to me sounds a little bit ominous. Okay, so at the first part, he says something kind of interesting. I don't know what to make of this, if there's anything to be made of this, but he says, Ezra Taft Benson served as the president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints from November 1985 until May 1994. I was 33 years old when President Benson became the president of the church and 42 when he passed away. And his teachings and testimony influenced me in profound and powerful ways. So I don't know why, but he gives those dates and then he gives his age for those dates. I don't think that it's just random. I don't know what the purpose would be. I don't know if I'm not exactly sure. I mean, maybe he's just giving that as a fact, but I think that whenever they write their talks, they only have so much time to talk. And so they want to use that time wisely. And for some reason, he's pointing out these dates and his age. Now, if anybody has any thoughts about that, like why he would do that, let me know. I don't think that it's just arbitrary. And as you can see, I have the year 1985 highlighted in red because I have one idea, maybe, why he may have included this. So anyway, skipping down, a particular teaching by President Benson greatly impacted me and continues to influence my study of the Book of Mormon. He said, "The Book of Mormon was written for our day. The Nephites never had the book, neither did the Lamanites of ancient times. It was meant for us. Mormon wrote near the end of the Nephite civilization. Under the inspiration of God, who sees all things from the beginning, Mormon abridged centuries of records, choosing the stories, speeches, and events that would be most helpful to us." Skipping down, President Benson's statements help us to understand that the Book of Mormon is not primarily a historical record that looks to the past. Rather, this volume of scripture looks to the future and contains principles, warnings, and by the way, I think that's mostly what this talk is focused on, is warnings and lessons intended for the circumstances and challenges of our day. Hence, the Book of Mormon is a book about our future and the times in which we do now and will yet live. And then the next section is called The Nephites and the Lamanites. The record of Helaman and his sons describes a people who were anticipating the birth of Jesus Christ. All right, so let's pause right there. So we know that the Book of Mormon, especially certain books, are a foreshadowing of our own time. In particular, like in this case, Helaman and the people who were anticipating the birth of Jesus Christ, just like how we are anticipating Christ's return. And by the way, make sure to subscribe to Caitlin. Her channel is called Anticipating Christ's Return. She's under my featured channels list, and I'll put a link for her channel in the description box below. So here's a book, okay, Helaman, that maybe we should really study and think about. And Elder Bednar is helping us do it in this talk. So a people who are anticipating the birth of Jesus Christ, just like we are anticipating the return of Jesus Christ. Okay, the next part. The half century recounted in the scriptural record highlights the conversion and righteousness of the Lamanites and the wickedness, apostasy, and abominations of the Nephites. Okay, so he's talking about a half century, so that's 50 years, and you have all this change in both among the Lamanites and the Nephites. In the case of the Lamanites, for the better. In the case of the Nephites, for the worse. And so we're supposed to think about this. And I don't think that this is saying that it's inevitable. Okay. It's supposed to be a warning. It's supposed to be a lesson, and we can change. We can avoid the same mistakes that the Nephites made. Okay. But before we continue with the talk, you'll notice that I have half century highlighted in purple. And when I got to this part, I was thinking back to the beginning of his talk where he talked about the fact that Ezra Taft Benson became president of the church in November 1985. And I was thinking, okay, what is 50 years from 1985? Well, 50 years later would be 2035. And I know a lot of you, I'm not so much in this camp, but I know a lot of you are really looking at the years like 2033, 2034, 2035, and so on, because that would be like 2,000 years from the time that Christ was crucified, or, something along those lines. So I'm willing to entertain that idea. I mean, I'm more interested in just waiting and seeing what actually happens. But this is kind of interesting. I don't know if this is at all what Elder Bednar intends, but one thing that is interesting about this idea is I have a spreadsheet. It's called Prophets Phrase Tracker. If you're new to my channel, I should have pulled this up. I use this website quite often. It's called the Scripture Citation Index. And you can go down here to the bottom right, search, and you can search scriptures, or you can search talks. And you can search General Conference talks going back to 1942. So you can search things like Second Coming, for example, and then it'll pull up all the talks that include that phrase. There's 341 so far. And so what I do is I'll count up the years and then tally them up and put them on a tracker like this. So this one is for presidents of the church from George Albert Smith until President Russell M. Nelson. So I haven't updated this for maybe, I don't know, it was probably 2023 sometime when I last updated this, so I need to update it again. But whenever it was, at that time, President Nelson had used the word hastening in 2 of his General Conference talks. So these are all talks from the time that they started speaking in General Conference. So it may have been when he was the Sunday School General President, for example, because he had that calling at one time. So it's not just during the time that they were presidents of the church, just whenever they started speaking in General Conference. Okay, so I have words like hastening, hasten. Oops. Go back down here. Oh, I messed it up. Whatever. Hastening, hasten, millennium, he returns, comes again, second coming. And there's more that I can search. This is an ongoing thing that I'm doing. But you'll notice that there's 2 presidents of the church that stand out among the rest when it comes to these second coming terms. And that is President Nelson in the number 1 spot, and following him is President Benson. The 2 of them are way beyond the other ones in terms of use of these words that have to do with the second coming. I've noticed a parallel between President Benson and President Nelson in a number of different ways. This is one of those ways. Another example is the first time that I've heard this analogy of, a baseball game and comparing that to the second coming was with President Benson. He said that we were in the last inning of the game. And then for FSY 2022, President Nelson said that we're in the last half of the 9th inning. And I've seen other things too. So with that in mind, with these two, President Benson and President Nelson, and we're looking at the year 1985 when President Benson became president of the church. I don't know. Maybe that started something. Maybe 50 years later, a half century later, or the 50 years that followed would be that time frame that would match with the Book of Helaman, or the Book of Helaman, and this spiritual downfall of the Nephites. It's just an idea. It's just an idea. Okay. So anyway, let's continue. Perhaps the most stunning and sobering aspect of this decline into apostasy by the Nephites is the fact that all these iniquities did come unto them in the space of not many years. Yeah, think back to the 80s. Think back to like all the warnings of Ezra Taft Benson about the decline of morality and things going on in politics and so forth. Think about the 80s compared to now. Excuse me, not just in terms of technology, but how we've declined both as a nation and the entire world. We've declined in morality and spiritual values. And think about how Christianity has changed from that time until now. Because now we're basically, like I've said time and time again, we're basically seeing the disintegration of Christianity. A lot of people are stepping away from these big denominations that used to dominate things for so many years. Now people are going non-denominational, or they're just doing church by themselves. You know, they may still be Christian, but they don't even attend even a non-denominational church. So, yeah, I think we're probably in that 50-year parallel period, if I were to guess. And that's probably why Elder Bednar is talking about it in his talk. All right, continuing. How could a once righteous people become hardened and wicked in such a short period of time? How could people so quickly forget the God who had blessed them so abundantly? In a powerful and profound way, the negative example of the Nephites is instructive for us today. Pride began to enter into the hearts of the people who professed to belong to the church of God because of their exceedingly great riches and their prosperity in the land. Okay, so this is interesting. So we have pride. That's how it starts out. And then we have people who are going to church. On the outside, it appears that they're members of the church, right? But they're prideful. And then on top of that, they're prideful because of their exceedingly great riches and their prosperity, which the Lord had blessed them with, right? It says right here, how could people so quickly forget the God who had blessed them so abundantly? All right, so continuing, they set their hearts upon the riches and the vain things of this world. Because of that pride which they suffered to enter into their hearts, which lifted them up beyond that which is good because of their exceedingly great riches. Ancient voices from the dust plead with us today to learn this everlasting lesson. Prosperity, possessions, and ease constitute a potent mixture that can lead even the righteous to drink the spiritual poison of pride. So I think there's kind of like two groups of people, okay? I don't think the moral of the story here is to not seek for riches or you're wicked if you have gotten ahead in life, you know, you've improved your circumstances. I don't think that's the moral of the story. I think you have two types of people. You have prideful people that seek for riches because they want to lift themselves up above others. So they're already prideful. There's already a problem there. But then you can have humble people that become rich. And if they're not careful, they can become prideful and I think all of us have probably experienced this to one degree or another. Like everybody, it doesn't matter how rich you are. I'm sure at some point in your life, you got a little bit ahead. Maybe you moved into a better neighborhood. Maybe you moved into a better city. Maybe suddenly you could afford nicer clothes, a nicer car. And so now you feel like you're joining like a club. You've leveled up. Now you're with these people and you're above, where you used to be. And you start to look down on people that are still in that condition. I'm sure all of us have done that at some point, right? I don't think it's something exclusive to rich people. So, and one thing that the Book of Mormon points out, I think a number of times, is how clothing was used as a way to distinguish between classes of people. Could you afford nice clothes? And that's an outward way, an obvious way to show that you're part of this class rather than part of that class. So yeah, you already have the already prideful people. A lot of them seek for riches because of pride. But if we're not careful, if we are humble, maybe these things can enter into our hearts too. And we got to be careful of that because of this next part right here. Okay. Allowing pride to enter into our hearts can cause us to mock that which is sacred, disbelieve in the spirit of prophecy and revelation, trample under our feet the commandments of God, deny the word of God, cast out, mock, and revile against the prophets, and forget the Lord our God, and not desire that the Lord our God, who hath created us, should rule and reign over us. So he's not strictly talking about riches and possessions. He's talking about pride, which can come because of riches and possessions and status, right? But the root of it is pride. Essentially, pride can lead you down a really bad path where you're doing all these things. And from a second coming standpoint, I try my best on this channel to look for signs of the times. And not everybody agrees when I point certain things out. And sometimes I think that I am right. I don't think I'm 100% right all the time, but I think a lot of times I am right when you have a certain event that takes place. A lot of people see it and it seems like it's a sign. But then there's other people that will ridicule it, right? They'll mock it. They'll disbelieve. They'll say that you're just crazy. It's just, it's just coincidence or whatever. And I have to wonder if what's going on is that person is actually desensitized to the spirit because of pride, because of pride. And it could be other things too. Like if you don't have a very vibrant spiritual life, there's probably a lot of things that you're going to miss, right? If you don't pray every day, for example, then you're probably not going to receive very many answers to your prayers. But if you do pray every day and you receive answers to your prayers, then you start to see how the Lord works. And then you can start to see it beyond just your individual level. You can see it at a national level, a church level, a worldwide level. So pride is a dangerous thing. It can dull your spiritual senses, I think. All right, continuing. Therefore, if we are not faithful and obedient, we can transform the God-given blessing of prosperity into a prideful curse that diverts and distracts us from eternal truths and vital spiritual priorities. We always must be on guard against a pride-induced and exaggerated sense of self-importance, a misguided evaluation of our own self-sufficiency, and seeking self instead of serving others. And this is another thing here. I think a lot of people pride themselves on self-sufficiency. It's the attitude of, well, I don't need your help. If anything, you need my help. and I can take care of myself. I don't need anybody else to help me. I don't need God to help me, right? I'm not like you where I need to pray for things. I, with my own wit and smarts and wisdom, I can figure things out myself. That's what a prideful person does. We all need God's help, and we all need help from each other. We do. If you don't think that you need help, you may want to check yourself for pride. Seriously. Okay, continuing. As we pridefully focus upon ourselves, we're also afflicted with spiritual blindness. There it is, spiritual blindness, a dulling of the spiritual senses, and miss much, most, or perhaps all that is occurring within and around us. You guys, I think it's mostly this crowd. When you try and talk about the second coming, or you talk about something that you think is a sign, and they ridicule you, or whatever, they don't like to talk about what maybe not even the second coming. They don't like to talk about spiritual things. They don't like to talk about the temple. They don't like to talk about whatever. This is possibly the reason why. All right, continuing. We cannot look to and focus upon Jesus Christ as the mark, quote unquote, if we only see ourselves. Now, there's a footnote for that. Footnote 18 takes you to Jacob chapter 4, verse 14. I want to read that, and also the verse afterwards. But behold, the Jews were a stiff-necked people, and they despised the words of plainness, and killed the prophets, and sought for things that they could not understand. Wherefore, because of their blindness, which blindness came by looking beyond the mark, they must needs fall. For God hath taken away his plainness from them, and delivered unto them many things which they cannot understand, because they desired it. And because they desired it, God hath done it, that they may stumble. Okay. I've read this scripture so many times on the channel because there's so many people that go off into the weeds and down these different rabbit holes when it comes to the second coming, where they try and use their own wisdom to figure out the scriptures instead of just listening to the plain words of the prophets, like President Nelson and his talk about the second coming, where he said, now's the time for you and for me, meaning the church and President Nelson himself, to prepare for the second coming. But you have people that they look beyond the mark, and that's what the Jews did. They read the scriptures, came up with their theories, and down rabbit holes and got all technical with the scriptures. And so when Christ came, he wasn't exciting enough. He didn't match their preconceptions of what the Messiah was supposed to be. All right, continuing. And now I, Jacob, am led on by the Spirit unto prophesying, for I perceive by the workings of the Spirit which is in me, that by the stumbling of the Jews, they will reject the stone upon which they might build and have safe foundation. Yeah, they rejected Christ when he came because of their pride and their preconceptions of how things were supposed to be. So let's read this again. As we pridefully focus upon ourselves, we also are afflicted with spiritual blindness and miss much, most, or perhaps all that is occurring within and around us. You know, President Nelson, in his talk, he said, I hope that we're not missing the grandeur of what's happening right now. Right? And his talk was about the second coming, by the way. But I think you and I both know people who are missing much or most or perhaps everything that he's trying to call our attention to. All right, continuing. We cannot look to and focus upon Jesus Christ as the mark if we only see ourselves. Such spiritual blindness also can cause us to turn out of the way of righteousness, fall away into forbidden paths, and become lost, as we blindly Now, pay attention to this. How many times he says our own. As we blindly turn unto our own ways and follow destructive detours, we are inclined to lean upon our own understanding, boast in our own strength, and depend on our own wisdom. Samuel the Lamanite succinctly summarized the turning away from God by the Nephites. Ye have sought all the days of your lives for that which ye could not obtain, and ye have sought for happiness in doing iniquity, which thing is contrary to the nature of that righteousness which is in our great and eternal head. I really like that because I've noticed in people that there's like this constant competition that some people are in against everybody that they know and against the entire world. And it could be riches, or it could be fame, or it could be career or something like that. But essentially, they'll get to a point. They'll try and get to a certain point and they'll achieve it, but then it doesn't satisfy them. It's not like, oh, I won the game. Once you win that game, then you just move on to the next game and you try and get, higher up into the company, or you try and buy a nicer house, or you try and obtain some new status. And it's this constant game of the grass is always greener on the other side, or the world is not enough. Like, even if you conquered the entire world, there's some people that once they conquered the entire world, that would not be enough. They would start conquering the moon and Jupiter and Mars and the entire solar system, and then that wouldn't be enough. So it's pride. It all boils down to pride. The prophet Mormon observed, the more part of the people remained in their pride and wickedness, and the lesser part walked more circumspectly before the Lord. So you guys, I don't think that we're all doomed. Like, this is absolutely what's going to happen with us. It's a warning because we have agency and we can choose not to fall into the same trap that the Nephites did. So I wouldn't get into the frame of mind of like, oh, well, it happened in the Book of Mormon, so it has to happen in the last days. No, we can change. And we do that by preaching the gospel and being good examples and doing what we know that we need to do, and then helping others. You can really influence the other people in your life. And that's what we should try and do and try and avoid these same mistakes. And then later on, he says apostasy can occur at two basic levels: institutional and individual. At the institutional level, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints will not be lost through apostasy or taken from the earth. Some of you really need to pay attention to that, because there are different groups out there, individuals and groups, that will claim that, for example, Brigham Young is a fallen prophet, or President Nelson has taken the church in a wrong direction. No, that's not true. The people that are trying to convince you of that have their own little rabbit holes that they go down. They're usually very convoluted, and they're usually on the path to apostasy, individual apostasy. So don't follow them. Okay, later on. If, however, you or I believe that we could be afflicted with and by pride, then we consistently will do the small and simple things that will protect and help us become, as a child, submissive, meek, humble, patient, full of love, willing to submit to all things which the Lord seeth fit to inflict upon us. Blessed are they who humble themselves without being compelled to be humble. And these are the things right here that are really important in life. You know, I love talking about the second coming, and we should talk about it. We should watch for the signs of the times, but none of it is going to help you if you aren't practicing these things. And I think sometimes we just like skip over these lists of words, and we're like, oh yeah, I know what meek is. I know what humble is. That's no big deal. No, it is a big deal. It's a really big deal, because these are hard to master. And the reason why is because our natural man is like the opposite of these things. The natural man is not meek, is not submissive, is not humble, patient, or full of love. The natural man is an animal full of hate and impatience and pride, and it wants to dominate. And so that's where you get the competition. You're trying to be better than everybody else. And it doesn't matter what. Some people are trying to be better at this. Some people are trying to be better at that. It could be something as silly as, oh, I have the biggest Coca-Cola collection. To some people, like that's their claim to fame, how they view themselves as being better than others. That makes them unique, right? No. We need to do things the Lord's way and not the way of the natural man. And this is what we really need to practice and focus on to help us be ready for the second coming. Okay, so the last thing that I want to point out is this talk made me think back to the First Presidency Christmas devotional of 2015, in which Elder Bednar spoke. And again, he was in the book of Helaman back then. And I'm thinking about doing a separate video about this because there's enough here for another video. But he did this thing where he was talking about Samuel the Lamanite, and he asked the congregation in the audience to please try to imagine that you are 10 years old and a member of the multitude listening to a prophet of God foretell future events. Samuel declared, "Behold, I give unto you a sign. For 5 years more cometh, and behold, then, then cometh the Son of God to redeem all those who shall believe on his name." And there's more to say about this talk, but I probably will do another video about it. But it's just really interesting seeing Elder Bednar, seeing these like two talks where he's thinking about this period of time in the lead up to Christ coming into the world, and how in turn, this is a foreshadowing of the second coming. So I think that we should view this as a warning. I think that we are in this period of time. Let's not be part of the people that part of the church, our nation, or the world, that part that goes the way of wickedness. Let's make sure that we don't let pride into our hearts, and be true disciples of Jesus Christ, and be ready for the second coming. Things can happen in a very short period of time, and I think that we're in that period of time right now. Okay, well, that's going to be it for this one. So if you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it, leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also, make sure to share it, and I'll talk to you guys later.